So we're at the OLLI. We're at the OLLI Lecture Series. Welcome to the OLLI Lecture Series featuring the Three Village Historical Society and the Town of Brookhaven historian. I'm going to introduce you to Bev Tyler, who is the Three Village Historical Society historian. Here's Bev.
Good morning. Good morning. Before we start, I'd like to introduce the panel that's going to speak to them today. And first, I'll speak first, and then it'll be Lindsay, Stewart, Goldberg. And then Donna Smith and Barbara Russell. Lindsay is the coordinator for the Three Village Historical Society Education. And Donna Smith is the education director and committee chair. And Barbara Russell is a member of the education committee and also town historian. Okay, and they'll join us as we go through the way. Sure.
Give us a minute. We're going to screen share the presentation here. So can everybody see at home?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, what we have or presenting is Chicken Hill, what it was, what it is, and how we're going to approach broadening the story of Chicken Hill. That's the most important thing that we're doing.
Right left.
The buttons right there. I did. At Setauket, Chicken Hill was a multinational, multi-ethnic, multiracial neighborhood in Setauket that existed from 1860 to 50 years longer than the factories that provided the bulk of employment for the men, women, and children who lived, loved, and labored there for no wages and low benefits. The small working class enclave of Chicken Hill is typical of many such neighborhoods throughout the United States. These communities arose, functioned, and disappeared for all kinds of local reasons, but their legacy persists in the fabric of the community that followed. To give you an idea, this is where the factory is located. The arrow on the upper map shows where Setauket is located on Long Island. The larger 19th century map shows the general location of the factory and its location in Setauket near the waterways that provided the factory with the necessary access for incoming supplies and outgoing material. The railroad, completed through Setauket to Port Jefferson in 1872, was another factor in the choice of Setauket for the factory. This is the 1917 Beers Comstock map showing the Chicken Hill area. Note the location of the Methodist Episcopal Church on the corner of Main Street and Route 25A. It's a little difficult to see, but if you go from the words 1917 Beers Comstock, you go to the left, and that little rectangle, and go to the bottom of that rectangle, you'll see the word church. And that's the center of the community. Note that the rubber factory is the red square over to the left. Most of the other buildings are houses and small businesses. This three-dimensional diorama of Chicken Hill is circa 1930. It was constructed from the memory of 92-year-old Setauket resident Hub Edwards. During a recent oral history interview, Hub identified the names and family connections of everyone who lived in the more than 50 houses. That's everyone who lived in the more than 50 houses, as well as where they went and what happened to them after they left Chicken Hill. The model was constructed by Robert Gladwish for the exhibit from a drawing by guess who? Of Edwards. Hub Edwards was born in 1929, lived with his family on Chicken Hill from 1934 until 1958. He played baseball with his Setauket High School team. The field is upper left, actually right next to the old Setauket High School. And at the same time, due to his athleticism, he played ball for the semi-pro Suffolk Giant Juniors. That field is lower right. A black team, the Suffolk Giant Juniors was black. And he also played for the semi-pro Setauket Athletic Baseball team. Hub said, I was playing baseball with the men since I was in junior high school. Hub noted the building next to the Suffolk Giant Juniors field, just down from it in your picture, is a lipstick factory. Came in there and they made it a one-story building, and part of that building sits there now that was part of the rubber factory. So from that building where the ball field is and where the ball field is was all factory ground. Hub noted most of the houses on Chicken Hill as late as the 1950s had no running water, just wells, and each of the houses had their own outhouse. They built, he quote says, they built their own cistern or well. Some of them didn't get city water until the houses were torn down. That was really primitive, end quote. At the end of the second hour of taping, Hub commented, I love history. I got in it with Ted Green. Sometimes we'd be 3 o'clock in the morning doing history. Ted Green died about 2 decades ago. He was the last chief of the Setauket in Setauket. Now I'd like to introduce Stuart, Lindsay Stewart Goldberg.
I know my name is a mouthful.
Huh?
I said, I know my name is a mouthful. Good morning. All right. Now, 3 of the Chicken Hill factory houses usually used originally to house factory workers and their families were located on property where the Setauket Fire Department needed to expand. The 2-story houses were given to the Three Village Community Trust, which owned a number of historic buildings in Setauket and Stony Brook. Following a fundraising campaign, the houses were moved onto trust property behind their headquarters. At least one of the buildings, the last vestiges of a community that disappeared, will function as a museum and education center telling the story of Chicken Hill. The Three Village Historical Society Roads Committee met weekly over the past 2 decades until the COVID pandemic ended their meetings in 2020. Between 2003 and 2008, the committee produced 3 books on our local history, which became the nucleus for the exhibit. Dr. Frank Toronto, a Three Village Historical Society exhibits chair and Roads Committee leader, took on the work as an exhibit and curator and guided committee members and the exhibit to its successful debut. The Chicken Hill exhibit opened in the Three Village Historical Society History Center in 2014. The Chicken Hill exhibit was a winner of the American Association for State and Local Histories Award of Merit in 2015. This image is Edward Lane's idyllic view of the rubber factory. The factory owner representatives went to New York City to bring immigrant workers to Setauket to work in the factory. This happened many times between 1876 and 1904. And this photo is courtesy of the Long Island Museum. All right, and you can see in the rear of the main rubber factory building in the background, you see the working men of the rubber factory picture that was taken in 1894. And this is the interior of the main factory building. There's a lot to see in this picture. Note there is a presence of a young girl right here in the center, and there's a young boy on the right side of the picture. All right, and in this image, you'll see that there are another picture taken in 1894 of the children of the rubber factory. And you see that there is a primary source document on the screen here that we'll talk about a little more about primary sources we've used. But there's a quote of the general regulations that read, quote, "No minor shall be employed without the consent of parent or guardian, nor any child of 14 years of age or under who had not attended school during 3 of the 12 months previous." The Setauket Rubber Factory was ready to open by December of 1876. By early 1877, the factory was shipping its products consisting of boots, shoes, belting, car springs, and other rubber goods. In 1880, there were about 125 workers. There were enough Irish workers by 1881 to have a St. Patrick's Day parade. By 1885, with new management and a new name, there were 300 to 400 employees, and Rubber Factory was the Suffolk County's largest employer. By 1880, a Catholic church was organized. In that same year, the rubber factory was closed, refinanced, and reopened. By 1892, there were 100 Jewish families living in Setauket, and Jewish workers were so essential to the operation that high holy days induced a general plant shutdown. A number of disastrous fires occurred between 1893 and 1898. After the fires, the removal of much of the factory equipment and closing of most of the rubber factory operations resulted in the majority of workers leaving Setauket. The last fire in 1904 destroyed the rest of the main factory buildings. So Chicken Hill was a close-knit community. They lived together, they worked together, and they socialized together. One example is the importance baseball played in the community. The Suffolk Giant Juniors was a successful Black baseball team that constructed a ball field on the location of the rubber factory buildings. The exhibit tells the story of the team.
The rubber factory came down after the fire.
Yes, the rubber factory was torn down after the 1904 fire. And as you see here, there's a game for the guys. And there's also an image here of conversations with the ladies. They're, as the description label says, there are three sisters and their children, and this photo was taken circa 1934. Right. And this is a Castro's Frankfurter stand, circa 1950s. It was located near the ball field. Now I'm wondering, where are the baseball stands? Right. And religious fellowship was important unto the community. And I may be mispronouncing this, but the Agudas Akim Good Fellowship Synagogue, founded in 1893. It is said to be the oldest synagogue on Long Island. It functioned until 1914 and was then closed. It reopened in 1948 and evolved into the North Shore Jewish Center in 1971. And you note the picture on the left side of your screen, and you would notice the Star of David right on the top there. And so I am going to introduce you to Donna Smith, who is going to continue the presentation.
See if I got this right. So, how do we know what we know? So, one of the things that you've even seen some of these are primary source documents. They provide us with the most accurate information. You see here the general regulations, and Lindsay read one part of it about the children. And also next to it is a receipt for boots. So we rely on primary source documents. Another source would be photos. Photos taken at the time often tell multiple stories. Now, if you look at the larger photo, you can see a banner and it says, remember the name. All right, remember your history? Okay, so that would let us know as historians that this had to be taken sometime after
1898.
Oh, good for you.
Good.
1898, when the Maine was sunk in February. These secondary sources can also tell us stories when they're well researched, as the one written by Helen Gerard, and it's titled, "And We're Still Here." Two other examples pictured are the research done by Mark Stern in the 1991 Long Island Historical Journal, and the Pinnis family genealogy. Sam Golden a third-generation resident of Chicken Hill, was interviewed and photographed for Helen Gerard's book. If we listen to the story that Sam Golden told, it captures a glimpse of the lives of the Chicken Hill residents. Sam Golden, born 1898, quote, "My father got a job in a rubber factory here in Setauket in 1886. He was a cutter. He would lay the last of a shoe, and with a very sharp knife that he had, would cut this last out, a whole pile of them at the time. These were for overshoes, rubbers. It was piecework. He courted my mother by leaving some at her spot every morning. Factory had their own script, money, and the men who ran the two general stores around here, they used to take this script, all their goods, and the company owned housing. This was a real company town," end quote. Setauket, 1975. One of the dozen or more oral histories in the exhibit is by Helen Strzelecki Bubka, who grew up on Chicken Hill. Helen Strzelecki was the 8th of 9 children of Samuel and Sophie Strzelecki. She was born and raised in Setauket on the family farm on South Jersey Avenue. Her Polish mother and Russian father emigrated from Europe. Helen attended Setauket School on the Hill, just east of the Setauket Firehouse and the VFW log cabin. Helen said, quote, "Lunchtimes, we all ran home to get our lunch and would run back to school quick so that we could, play ball or something during the time. One of my fondest memories was how the boys, Hubble and his brother Beebe, came to help me. There was a boy living in town. He was pestering me. I was just a young teenager and I was frightened of him. I found out later that Beebe and Hubble went and told him to leave me alone. That's how close the relationships were with our friends on Chicken Hill. We all got along so well together. Black, white, Jewish, Polish, Russian, Lithuanian. Didn't make a difference what nationality or color you were. You needed help, you could depend on all your neighbors one way or another. Somebody would come through and pitch in and help. If somebody was ill, they would take food to them, and they would try to help in so many different ways. It was such a close-knit community. And I think that's my fondest memory. Stories like chicken fishing and Jake the Crow are an important part of Chicken Hill's history and folklore. As the story goes, a young man living on the second floor of a factory house was hungry. He hadn't caught any fish down at the harbor for several days, and he had an idea. He took his fishing rod and the line, put a kernel of corn on the hook, and lowered it out the window. When one of the many chickens looking for food came by and grabbed the corn, he plucked up the chicken and had a nice supper. This was the first successful chicken fishing in Setauket. As detailed in the Chicken Hill exhibit, quote, "For the better part of the 1930s, Jake the Crow was a fixture at Jaime Golden's general store and gas station. He sat on the gas pumps outside, and when a customer arrived, he flew into the store, making a racket to alert Jaime. At his demise, O.C. Lemford, founder of the Stony Brook Museum, had him stopped. When this museum became the Stony Brook Carriage Museum, now the Long Island Museum of American Art, History, and Carriages, Jake went along. Jake's residence again changed with the transfer of Lemford's taxidermy collection to the Long Island Natural History Museum at Stony Brook University. Now, Jake looks over visitors for a time at the Three Village Historical Society Chicken Hill exhibit. In 1894, a second factory was built in East Setauket, just west of Shore Road. The East Setauket factory produced a few rubber goods into the 1940s. Joseph Eichwald, his parents immigrated from Russia and came to Setauket to work in the rubber factory, remembered the East Setauket factory operating. Quote, I was standing out there the day that George Blydenburg had his arm taken off. He got it cooked. He got it caught in the mangle. It was where you fed the rubber into. The machine flattened it out, you know. I also recall James Elberson, a store clerk who had at one time been in a more lofty position. Quote, the best one was old man Elberson. You ever hear the name mentioned? He was a big shot. He had charge of all the rubber factories. He sold everything from pins, automobile tires, anything you wanted. And I went in there one day and I wanted to buy a pair of rubber shoes. He says, yeah, I got them. So I bought a pair of rubber shoes from him for 20 cents. And I says to him, how long will they last, Mr. Elberton? He said, well, they ought to last until you get home, if you catch a ride. I laughed. He was a witty old cuss. Oral histories are an important part of the Chicken Hill exhibit. This is an alcove with a computer and the stories recorded by the 13 local residents who told some of the stories of Chicken Hill. And now, I'll turn over to Barbara Russell.
Good morning. We know there is more to the story. How do we dig deeper and make it a richer experience? So far, we have only told you part of the story. This is the Setauket High School class of 1940. Anyone notice what's missing? Correct, people of color. They weren't always allowed to go. And they were part of it. So we have more to tell.
Who made that regulation?
Was it the school? I think it was a hotel problem in Washington.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's a closer picture of the school on the hill that Donna just spoke to you. This is about 1912. A local resident for many years and a graduate of the school wrote a book called The Songs of Wild Fields. It's available locally. And she talked about life living among Chicken Hill community, going to school with them. And I'd like to read you a quote from her book. Quote, but the greatest teacher we ever had was Elizabeth Hendrickson, who cared about all of us in the 8th grade. By now, some of the boys were as old as 16. One girl was pregnant. Some could barely read. Somehow she got them all to come to school and get away from their poverty and abuse in dysfunctional families, if only for a few hours, end quote. In order to make our current exhibit richer, the oral histories and stories that, such as I just said, have to be included. This is the 1949 aerial of the Chicken Hill area. And Bev talked about the Methodist Church. For those of us in the room,
Right there.
it's right there. Still in the center of the community. but changed in 1949. So I'm going to continue with some of Ruth's memories. Quote, there were many Polish and Black families from Chicken Hill generally, and from Christian Avenue and the outlying farms. Some of the last names were Iwanicki, Babsky, Strolecki, Matoldi, Kowalski, Deptola, all hardworking families who sent their children to school. They were almost all well-behaved, polite, generous kids. Scott, Sells, Hart, Thomas, Burns, Cuffy, all families from generations of African American and Indian heritage. The rest of us were WASPs mainly. We were from families who had lived here for 9 or 10 generations. There were 2 or 3 Jewish families at the time. There's your church in the center of the picture. I'd like to read to you, now this, going back a little bit in time, 1892, factories still existing. This is a newspaper article. And Mr. Elberson, you just heard the name, was an owner and manager of the rubber factory. J.W. Elberson, with his usual good sense and tact in grasping the situation, has given the edict that under no circumstances will he employ any foreign help until the advent of cold weather, and all chances of bringing the cholera to our village are reduced to the minimum. As a further precaution, Mr. E has decided to thoroughly disinfect the factory and his tenement houses. And in this move follows in line with all employers of large numbers of people. I think you're getting the picture. There was a concern in the community of the immigrants bringing in diseases, not living in the most conducive to healthy environment. Houses, sometimes many families were in these small houses. The community obviously had concerns over the health conditions. The factories had factory housing. A local resident by the name of Albert Halleck wrote his memoirs for his grandchildren in the 1930s. As you can see, he has quite a bit of artistic ability. He went on to become an architect. These are some examples of his hand-drawn maps. And he illustrated and described a tenement house a short distance east of the fact of Chicken Hill. This is his sketch of it. I'm going to quote from his writing, but note both his description and his opinion. Quote, a curious establishment in our community was an enormous rambling old house on the next lot east of Roberts Place. It had been nicknamed Castle Garden after the place where the foreign immigrants arrived in New York, because it was occupied at the time by several large Jewish families. There were at one time reported to have been 15 families occupying this house simultaneously. In some cases, it was said that a large family occupied a single room. Of course, there was no modern plumbing, and poverty and ignorance were the rule with these people. Thus, Castle Garden acquired a deservedly notorious and unsavory reputation. You heard about the fire in the factory. At some points, it went bankrupt and resurfaced again. This is a photo of William Hart, a fisherman. After the rubber factory closed, some of the workers found work in other areas of the community. Usually jobs were limited to fishing, farm work, carpentry, and domestic work. I'm going ahead here to a 1937 article. The exhibit contains stories that are nostalgic, but not those that may be difficult to hear or make people uncomfortable. Quote, lifting the lid off the vice conditions that have prevailed for some time on Chicken Hill, East Setauket. Brookhaven Town Police arrested 12 men, white and color, and a 16-year-old white girl over the weekend in one of the most widespread campaign of its kind ever waged in Suffolk. The article is dated 1937 and shows that the Chicken Hill community by then had a somewhat disreputable reputation. And it was not helped by the postcards shown here that depict unsympathetic views of people of color. To Lindsay.
It's not letting me move to the next slide.
Using that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. As you see here, these are exhibit sections in the Chicken Hill exhibit in the History Center. The exhibit space is approximately 400 square feet. These photos show a part of the three of the major areas: the piano and rubber factories and the work involved, how the people on Chicken Hill came together at churches and synagogues for weddings, births, baptisms, and bar mitzvahs, and how they came together for social life. And at this time, I'm gonna give this back to Deb.
What we want to do is reach a wider audience. And the Three Village Community Trust has moved, preserved, and restored these former factory workers' houses. You see them in a restored condition compared to moving them up the street from where they were near the Setauket Fire Department.
Excuse me, where are they?
There.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll show you exactly where they are on the map. As we go through, it's easier to go back to the map in a minute. That way they'll serve a wider audience. Outside of the Three Village Historical Society Chicken Hill exhibit, which is just one room. We have a much bigger story to tell than what you will see in 400 square feet. And also putting it into these houses, or one of them anyway, the exhibit, will give the opportunity for instance, as an example, the Three Village school children who, for Founders Day, come to the Setauket School Auditorium over a period of 2 days, so that we end up teaching all the fourth graders. They could also walk right up the street from the Setauket School on the sidewalk, right to these three buildings, and get the experience of not only the exhibit, but the exhibit in context inside one of the houses that was used by the rubber factory workers. In addition to that, we're trying to design a program that will be able to go into the schools, especially for junior high school, and we know we need to do it. And in fact, the school has asked us to produce this kind of a educational program for them. And so that's what we're working on. And basically, we need to tell this fuller story. And that's what we're after, some ideas. We already got some ideas the last two times that we put this program on. And we're interested in ideas from you here in the audience and from the people at home as to some of the things that you might want, and also to try to answer some of the questions that you have. So let's go back and answer that first question. Okay. Here you see the Chicken Hill area, the Methodist Church, and the three houses are now right here. This is the Three Village Community Trust. That's the Three Village Community Trust home.
So they're behind it.
And right behind it here is the
Did you find the roads that we're looking at?
this is Main Street going down to the Village Green. This is Old Town Road going south. This is 25A going towards Stony Brook and 25A going toward Port Jefferson. This is the old schoolhouse that was built in 1911 and torn down after its use was changed in 1951. Sometime after 1951, it was torn down. And like I said, this is where the Three Village Community Trust has their headquarters and the three houses behind it.
And is that the neighborhood house down at the bottom?
No, that's the Catholic Church. The original Catholic Church that was built as the Catholic Eastern Europe workers came to the community, and that's the church they built. Although they didn't put their graveyard there, the graveyard is way over here where the current Catholic Church is, and that's the graveyard that they first used. But when they redid and moved from this smaller building, they built a building right there at their own graveyard. Yeah, Emma Clark is down this way.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what the school is?
you're heading for the Village Green. To the Village Green, that way.
That,
Chicken Hill was that whole area that's on the map?
Yeah, this was where all of the houses were, except for Castle Garden. Castle Garden, you have to go down 25A till you get to the road to Poquat. And the first one, Washington Street is the second one at the top of the hill.
Inwood Manor Road?
Yes,
Is that-
Yeah.
yes. And there's a chiropractor on the corner.
yes.
Castle Garden was just to the east of the chiropractor's
Right,
house.
there's some small houses there now, but the Victorian was already there.
And show them where the lower East Setauket Rubber Factory was.
Oh, the lower East Setauket Rubber Factory was down here.
Just off the map, basically.
It's off the map, but you know where the stream goes under the
Near Seaport Valley?
and makes a
Yes.
pond?
Seaport Deli?
Yes,
Yeah.
in that area.
Well, just to this side of Seaport Deli, the factory was right over top of the water.
It's hard to imagine factories in Setauket.
Yeah.
I'm talking now. So what was it about Setauket that made it a good place to have a rubber factory?
Well,
There were two rubber factories.
yeah, there were two factors. The first factor was when, before the rubber factory, it was a piano factory. But when the piano factory was there, in the 1850s, through the 1850s, maybe into the 1860s, we're not quite sure. It was water. It was everything came in by water, because you had to have coal to run the steam machines. So that was what was used. By the time the rubber factory came in 1876, the railroad was already out here. So you had the railroad, and Setauket was a railroad stop right on what's now Nald Hollow Road, but used to be called Station Road because it went to the railroad station. So you had the railroad and you had coal also coming in mostly by ship to what's now the Setauket dock on Shore Road. So that was the impetus for one of the reasons. The other one was simply that they didn't say why they chose it other than that, but that's certainly a good reason when you got the transportation. Although you do have the hill to get up, and there's some indication that there may have been a rail line with some small kind of an engine or something that went from the area in East Setauket, just this side of the pond, where there's a gas station there.
Mario's.
Yes, there are some rail lines at very, very low tide that you can see
Right,
back
and
there.
did they come all the way up the street? We don't know. There's no indication they did, but that's a possibility. I don't know.
Could you show us one more time on that map that was just there, where the rubber factory was when?
Because there were two.
I just wanted, I
to.
switched to that picture just to give you an idea of how massive this factory was compared to the picture.
So where was the second rubber factory, the smaller one?
Right next to Seaport Hill.
So where, the big one was where?
The big one was up at the top of the hill. There's a drive-in dairy there now.
Oh,
And there's a,
we're close.
yeah, on 25A, you're going from downtown East Setauket west. So you're going up the hill. Going up the hill.
Across the Setauket
This
Fire
is,
Department.
the fire department is there. The Methodist church is on the opposite corner.
This is the
On the
same,
left side, where there's a drive-in dairy, up there is where the factory was. I think there's a gymnastics place up in the back.
And back.
That's where the factory was.
this is South Jersey. This is South Jersey, North Jersey. There's a building right here now. And this is about where the store is, drive-in store. But this is where the ball field was in the picture. And that's where the factory. And it just shows, they're only showing a little square, but the factory took a lot more room. Yes,
Actually, this changes the top of the site, I apologize, but you mentioned that people of color kind of disappeared as time went on. The pictures of the school population and so on. I'm wondering if the community around the Bethlehem Church, if any of those individuals currently, the families there, was there any crossover?
Yes.
Oh, yes. When he told you about Hub Edwards,
Yeah.
Hub Edwards lives in that Christian Avenue community. Yes, yes.
Hub Edwards lived just about here in this area. In fact, it was a large 3-story apartment building. And it was one of the few buildings for the people in Chicken Hill that actually had running water. And Hub says that the reason it had running water because it was next to the firehouse. But he, from the 3rd floor, he could look over and watch the people going into the Methodist church on Sunday morning. And he, believe it or not, he knew the names of every single person and every family that went into the church. He also attended there.
So Bev, was that area, because the Christian Avenue, that area is predominantly people of color. At the time, was it mixed in that area?
Oh, yeah.
It was.
It was until the diaspora, or whatever you want to call it. What happened was this area in 1950 was becoming very attractive to developers. So the owners of this land petitioned the Suffolk County Water Department to say that because the factory was in the area, that the land was polluted and that they should move the people out. So that's what happened. And most of a few of the black families, like Hub, actually bought land bought a house on Chicken Hill, but he did that prior to the houses being removed completely. But there was still interest in removing them. And after the land was deemed to not be good for habitation, because everybody had a well, everybody had their own well, and they had their own outhouse. We had your well here and your outhouse here. Not a good idea under any circumstance. But that wasn't the impetus. They just wanted to develop the area. And a lot of the people ended up going to the two black communities south and west of here. Name them.
South being Belport?
No,
South.
no, not that far. Well, Belport's one.
Yeah.
But
Wyandanch.
that's it. Wine Dance and the other one that's closer.
Belport, Brentwood, Amityville,
No, much halfway between here and Belport.
Quorum.
Yeah, but it's not called.
Oh, Gordon Heights.
Gordon Heights, there we go.
Oh, here we go.
Sorry. I'm gonna have to write this stuff down. So that should be part of the story as well. So this is all from Hub's memory. A lot of the people went to Gordon Heights and a lot of the people went to,
Belport and
Wyandanch.
West Wyandanch.
yeah.
Does the exhibit include the history of what happened to all these people? And
Yeah, well, Hub has the names of all these people. He knows where they moved.
so it's in the exhibit, it tell you what
No,
happened.
it's not.
No, it's not.
It's in what we're gathering.
Yes.
It's in
Oh,
the
okay.
stories that
Trying
we're
to make
gathering.
this exhibit much more
It would be
inclusive.
interesting to know what happened to what happened, why the houses got torn down
Yeah.
and where they.
But
where they
the
left
old
it.
histories, there are 13 oral
Some of the
histories.
oral history.
Yeah, some of it's in the oral history, but there also is a complete change in the way, in the late 50s and early 60s, this developed here at Stony Brook. So people were moving anyway, some of them. But yes, they didn't want to leave that area because some of the stories that we have basically say, we don't want, we're a community, but we don't want to be separated from our friends and stuff like that. So that was the ultimate for some of the people. They just didn't want to move, and there wasn't room for everybody to move to Christian Avenue.
So have you talked to other families in the area? The Sells family,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you have oral.
We're getting it, but nobody talks about this kind of thing. I mean, even my family, nobody talks about it. The relationship in this community was, I mean, it was just, we were together. When I graduated from Setauket School, 9th grade in 1953, there were 22 in my class. That's all of Setauket. And there were 6 people of color, black people, Hearts, Cells, others in my class. And they were just other kids. And, it's just the way we grew up. And so we didn't talk about it because there wasn't anything to talk about.
Very
And,
unique community then. I
huh?
mean, very unique for that time.
It's actually, this uniqueness goes all the way back to the 1600s when this area was first settled in 1655 to 58. And some of the other families who were kicked out of places like Southampton and Southold came to Setauket because it was a small community and it welcomed everybody.
An example of that is the Quakers. They were not welcome in South Helena.
That's right.
And
Quakers were taken over to New Haven and whipped.
Yeah, and they were paying, we were under the auspices of Hartford, which was accepting of Quakers. And the Quakers came west to the Setauket area.
So this, that's my feeling, that this has been the way in which this community existed right from the 1600s. Yes,
So,
but we didn't do well with the indigenous people anyway, because we took their land and we moved them around. One of the things in the town records says that the residents, English settlers, were disturbed at the Native Americans, the Setauket, because they kept digging holes and putting in their different foods to store over the winter time. And the cattle from the settlers would step in the holes and break their legs. So that wasn't actually appreciated. So they were moved, and they ended up being moved. There was a lot of disease, so the Setauket became a smaller group. They were moved first of all to what's now Strong's Neck. It's called Little Neck. But then, of course, when the Lord of the Manor came along in 1692 to 95, he took over that area, and they were again dispersed in other areas, but not together, unfortunately. So change. Yes.
This is sort of contradictory in
Why
some
don't you
ways.
guys come up here?
It's contradictory because here we have a community that's so special because of its inclusiveness.
Right.
Yet then you have developed in the same community, Oldfield, which was very, exclusive, not only in financial ways, but also in prohibiting people of certain religions and colors and everything from entering that area.
And that came about, the community was incorporated in 27 or 28. And incorporated communities sprang up all over Long Island to control who lived there. But prior to that, Oldfield had many residents of color. And there was a excavation site a few years ago, right on Oldfield Road.
One of the stories told to me in the 1970s by a friend who's a real estate agent and has been in the community for many, many years. She came up to me one day shaking her head, and she needed to vent, and she knew she could vent with me. And she said, I took this family, husband, wife, and 18 kids, up to this street just to the north of Christian Avenue. Park Street.
Oh, off of West Meadow Road?
Yeah, off of West Mill Road. And I was showing them some houses. And when we came and when we left, we went through by Christian Avenue, because she wanted to make sure that they understood that this is a multi-ethnic community. And she didn't say that, she just did it. She just drove them by Christian Avenue, where other real estate agents might have just taken them down Quaker or
West Meadow Road.
West Meadow Road to Main Street, and then down that way. And then when they got back to the office, the family said, oh yeah, we like the house on Park Street, but what can we do about getting the Black families out of here? Now, these people had been there since the 1600s, at least the 1700s as slaves, and then with their own community and their own church and everything like that. So she said, I don't want to deal with you anymore. And she told them to leave, but she was venting with me. And that's some of the attitude that comes here. We also have many, many small communities, and people basically come here and they want to be with people who are like them. And if you're of a certain socioeconomic level, why would you want to not live with other people of the same socioeconomic level? On the other hand, we need to constantly regenerate the idea that we're one community and that we have organization. You can't get a better place to live than a place that has the Long Island Museum, the Ward Melville Heritage, the Frank Melville Memorial Park, and on I could name the Benner Farm, Three Village Historical Society, Gallery North.
Don't forget to throw in Stony Brook University,
Stony Brook, yeah. I mean,
our host here.
there is just, this area is just absolutely chock-a-block full. I drove home one day, this was probably in the early 90s, and it happened to be Arbor Day. And I was doing a tour as Abraham Woodhull of the area behind the Caroline Church. And as I walked to the Frank Melville Memorial Park, the Three Village Garden Club had people at various trees portraying the trees, and with a busload of kids from either kindergarten or first grade. So I had fourth graders with a bus at Caroline Church. They had another bus up Bates Road that they were teaching the kids. When I went home, I went over by Benner's Farm because I had to go to the day school on Old Town Road to pick up a check for the historical society. And at Benner's Farm, there were 2 school buses. And then I picked up the check and I went home via Old Post Road. And at the Sherwood Jane Farm, there was 2 buses there with the kids at the Sherwood Jane Farm. That's all one day, just in Setauket. Where else in this country do you have that kind of 501c3 organizations that can teach our children about the area?
And don't forget Stony Brook.
And don't forget Stony Brook.
Thank you.
I didn't go to Stony Brook that day, so I don't know what was happening.
So do you have any suggestions for us? I mean, we're just going out to groups like this group to tell this story and tell that it's a very small exhibit in a building, and it needs to get a wider audience, and it needs to tell a more complete story. So if you have suggestions for us and
You're-
online people, right?
You're looking to get the word out, or you're looking for more information?
Both.
And you've talked to most of the families that originated there, you said, and you have their,
We have
We're
lots
talking
of.
to them.
I'm sorry?
We're talking to them, yeah. Hub is the basic.
Well, I know, yeah. But what about the Hart family?
And yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many of them.
But remember, there's a problem too.
up so everybody can see?
I like sitting down.
But they can't see you at home.
Okay,
No,
oh, sorry,
up here.
young people. So one of the problems that we have discovered is that when you look at the 13 oral histories that I talked about earlier, a lot of times when we look back at our childhood, our memories are fond. And so, you know, the one
It's a
story,
happy story.
yeah,
is what we
so a
have
lot
in
of them are
here.
happy stories. Now, Barbara had contrasting stories
Right.
that told us kind of a more difficult tale. And you have to be careful when you talk to people because they're older now and you're getting these wonderful,
Nostalgic.
nostalgic good word.
Yeah, did I miss hearing how the name Chicken Hill came about?
It was a derogatory term to begin with.
Good question.
And you know, that's a place with all the chickens running around. So
Hence the chicken fishing.
Right, yeah, I kind of figured there were a lot of chickens.
but you know, but we've turned it into a positive.
Did they refer to it as Chicken Hill when they lived there?
We don't know.
Oh,
There's a question from the people at home. Is anything published about Chicken Hill?
Well, Mark Stern's book on the rubber factory, and no, we do not have a book on Chicken Hill
Like
yet.
In our plans,
Yeah, like we have a book for the exhibit Spies, but no book yet for the exhibit Chicken Hill. And we really don't want to produce a book until we can do it well. And obviously, what we're saying is there are still problems with our story. Yes.
I think this is so important, and I think, to me, the important goal is that young people, I think of, two of us here volunteered at the museum, at least two of us years ago, and hosted school groups at the Long Island Museum. There was that wonderful program, Catching the Tune, every
Yes.
grade.
Yes.
I was a part of that, but I taught fourth grade in Three Village.
And later on, I went back to teaching, but to me, the important thing is, the young people. I mean, I'm thinking, a number of us did a program here on the 1619 project. We are also a university community, we're in the Northeast. We should be able to deal with this history. And I know that it takes courage, because there will be people who, like you say, want to just live with those fond memories. But just as you started to talk about some of the children happy to come to school because they were escaping poverty and abuse at home, there was that piece there, and that kind of woke me up and said, wait a second, it has to be nuanced, or it's just fairy tale.
Yeah.
And you saw the postcards. We were horrified when we were doing the research for this program. When we saw those postcards.
Those are local postcards, all local postcards.
Yeah, that has to be, and nowhere, yes, elementary school is important, obviously. But I think one of the things we're trying to do in the education committee is reach to the junior high, especially and high school, so that we can help them dig deeper into, questioning techniques. Why is this important? What does that do for us now? And what do you look at when you look at that community? All those questions.
Yeah, critical thinking. That's very rich for you to provide them with some of the,
TBQs.
TBQs, thank you.
Remember DBQs? I love DBQs,
I
sorry.
do too, and I love using odd things for them.
Me too, I thought they were great.
So I think focusing on junior high and high school is a good idea.
That's where we
Because I think it gets more controversial the younger you might introduce, even though it's appropriate, if you do it the right way, but I think,
Yeah, you have to be careful how much of that you teach to fourth graders.
Have you talked to the different districts? Have you been in the?
Well, we're right now
Still
talking to
trying.
Three Village. Three Villages we have a partnership with Three Village School District for a Founder's Day program. And they're the ones who have expressed the most interest in getting the Chicken Hill. And to my way of thinking, if we got to start local, and we've got a school district that wants us to do these things, let's get into the Three Village School District, and then we'll find out what other problems are in the program from the teachers and the administrators, and then we can take it wider.
What information do you feel is missing? Like, what's the biggest piece you feel is missing?
That's the question.
That is a good question. The problem, one of the problems is, of course, we don't know much about Hub's recollections are all, basically, he didn't move here till 1934, 1 and 29. So his relationships with the community, where Chicken Hill still existed, and they called it Chicken Hill. But he doesn't go back as far as
What's this piano and rubber factory?
Yeah.
what's her name, Helen Gerard,
Right.
who in 75 was interviewing people who actually lived and worked. And we have one even worse story, more, not worse.
Well, Sam Golden goes back.
Yeah, but that
Pretty
one woman, we didn't include her story about being run over by the cow and all that kind of stuff.
Not popping out of my head, so
Do
there
we
you
have
go.
any idea about the actual jobs that were performed inside the factory and what the working conditions were actually like and what the children were allowed to do?
Marston's, article in the Long Island Historical Journal, which was actually published at Stony Brook University, is pretty, detailed. And right down to like the businesses and the ones that went bankrupt, and I can't remember exactly how much
But
it goes
not
into
much about,
the
not
actual
much about the
working.
people.
We're lucky we have interior pictures with the big
So
machinery.
there's nobody left that can describe what the working
No.
conditions were
I
like.
think we have to get that from other recollections of other factories in other areas. For instance, all of the fabric factories up in Massachusetts and Connecticut, that we need to delve into how their stories of their workers, it's gonna be the same.
What about the similarity to the Patchogue lace factory over there? I mean, were there people you spoke to that?
How old is the lace?
The lace mill went longer because I know that
Oh, yeah.
they
yeah.
talk about 1915 or so, it was nicknamed Patchogue College.
Mhm.
Because so many graduates of Patchogue High School went on to work in the factory there. Yeah.
But there might be people,
Yeah.
there may be people that.
Let's talk, we'll talk about the historical side and see what they have.
Just because they're both factories.
Yeah,
I thank
it's a good idea.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll talk to,
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for when we say we take this on the road. We're trying to find some pieces that you might know about and help us to connect with.
Okay, I have several questions. Number one, which is a little bit off the topic, what is going on in the field that is right next to this?
So that's where the barn is being built. So the barn is our the future site of our exhibits and education center.
Oh, okay.
And we're also working on building a smaller building to host our archives as well.
Okay. Because I live up the road, that's the only reason I was asking.
yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately, and Lindsay, as an employee of the Historical Society, will tell you that story. It's been a horror.
Don't go into details.
Okay, I was very
Yeah, it's
curious.
just a very long process.
Okay, I was also thinking, like what you did with the Spiring, the Setauket Spiring. What about a walking tour with placards on the important sites? Because it's very good to use maps and everything, but it is a limited area. And have you ever thought of giving a walking
Oh,
tour?
Yeah. We have a walking tour book that goes from the Historical Society, the Thompson House in Gallery North, that
Yeah,
hub, up Main Street to the post office, up to the Village Green, and as far as the Setauket School. Okay, so that's basically colonial, right?
Mhm.
So now, if we take and do a second walking tour, which
Starting at the
Setauket School, and going up via the sidewalk to the Methodist Church, up past
The factory houses that you saw.
past the what's called the Setauket Forest. It's a state forest,
Across from Stop and Shop.
up past the Catholic Church, down the hill, back to the Historical Society. We'll have that whole,
But not-
we
but you
haven't
won't
done
have
it
the
yet.
rubber factory in there, right?
Yeah,
Can, because it was right across the street.
right, it's
The big
all
one.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not
Yeah.
necessarily every group.
Also,
We will do a walking tour. I
If I
think it's all
remember.
anyway, but-
Yeah.
There were primary, secondary and tertiary communities, and if I remember correctly, Setauket is a secondary community. Port Jefferson was a tertiary community. There are different times they were settled the primary communities of Southold and East Hampton and Southampton, and then Setauket came from there, and then Port Jefferson came from Setauket. Port Jefferson, number one, had a factory right at their harbor.
Yes.
Lots of factories.
Yes.
I don't know if they
Shirt
would,
making, shirt making.
if they would be able to, and that was around 1900, and they would supply any information to you. And number two, Port Jefferson students went to Setauket High School. So
Usually it was the other way around. Port Jefferson was the regional high school and Setauket students went there.
I was told of people who lived in Port
Because
Jefferson.
we went there.
Who went to,
We're part of that generation.
who went to Setauket School.
I went to Stony Brook, which then after sixth grade went to Port Jeff.
Yeah.
They went to Setauket.
Port Jefferson has had a high school since about, that gentleman,
Okay,
Albert
wow.
Halleck, he lived in Setauket. He went to Port Jefferson High School class of like 1902. Yeah.
Now, if you go back to the, 1700s,
Yeah.
yes, Austin Rowe, who lived in Port Jefferson. There were only 5 houses during the Revolutionary War in Port Jefferson. 5. Most of them were Rowe. And they all went to Setauket, to the one school on the Setauket Village Green. Right where the
But
carriage.
not
trail
in
is.
the 20th,
But-
late 19th and early 20th
Yeah.
century. They had their own schools in Port
That's right.
Jefferson.
Okay.
Yeah. And Setauket had a high school, but not for a real long time. I think 48 or so might have been about the last class.
Yeah, my father, who was born in 1915, he graduated from,
Setauket High School. So it had a high
But-
school for a limited time.
but some students who were graduating in that time period decided to go to Port Jefferson rather than Setauket. And they had the choice because Port Jefferson was a more regional high school and you could get into a better college
Right.
by graduating from Port Jeff and graduating from Setauket.
Like my neighbor graduated from Setauket in about 1929. But she wanted to go to Barnard. And she had to go to Port Jefferson for a year to take some upper level secondary school courses
Okay.
that were not offered in Setauket. And then she commuted to Barnard for 4 years from Setauket.
God bless him.
That's a commute.
And going back to this business of primary, secondary, tertiary, Setauket was primary. Setauket and Huntington was primary. Those were 1655, 1657 communities that developed, not just from Southold and Southampton, but also from Massachusetts and Connecticut.
Yes. Got it.
So they're basically primary communities. Southampton were the first two, and then Brookhaven, then Huntington, and further in Oyster Bay. Because basically, most of the transportation was by water, right through most of the 19th century. So the 3 main ports were Setauket and Port Jefferson. Was now Port Jefferson Harbor, was called Setauket Harbor, at least on the map, back in the 1700s. And so it was Setauket, Huntington, and Oyster Bay were the 3 main ports, and that's where the 3 main communities developed, and everything in between, including Smithtown, developed from that. Yes.
When were the 3 villages the way they are now? When was that like started or created or named? And it seems that Port Jeff was very much a part of it.
Well, Port
Always.
Jefferson was
Why was-
considered to be prior to 1950 or around that. Port Jefferson was one of the communities considered to join with Setauket and Stony Brook to be one school district. But because of Ward Melville push to have it just Setauket and Stony Brook, eventually it became that. And as the community started to grow in the late 50s with the university, it became evident eventually to the state that they shouldn't combine all these school districts. At least that's what Ward Melville was
What are
pushing.
the three villages?
Okay. The first term, Three Village, came about because Mr. Melville actually,
Ward Melville's mother.
yeah, Jenny Melville,
Right.
was one of the people forming the garden club. And they wanted a name for the garden club. And they couldn't think of a name because Setauket is a hamlet, Stony Brook is a hamlet, and Oldfield is a village. So just sort of pushing the envelope a bit, they came up with the idea, let's call it the Three Village
Garden Club.
Garden Club. So it was basically Stony Brook, Setauket, and Oldfield. And then one more village came in the 1930s. Hopewell. So now you have two hamlets.
Late 20s, 30s, I don't know exactly.
Two hamlets and two villages. But when we were designing the Three Village Bicentennial Committee in 1974 to celebrate 1976, we were turned down by the National Bicentennial Organization because we didn't have a political center. It was Brookhaven. So they turned us down. So I went to Steve Engelbright and I said, can you do something about this? So he said, well, why don't we tie it in to the Three Village School District? They're a political entity. So he got it submitted through the state, and because you have to go through the state to get to the federal. The state had actually turned us down. So Steve got it approved and we became the Three Village Bicentennial Committee because the school district came along in what year was it?
66.
66 and established a political designation for our area.
And when they formed the two districts, they called it the Three Village Central School District.
Right.
Before that, it was Setauket Union Free School District and Stony Brook School District. Community, Union Free. Yeah, Union Free. So Donna grew up in Stony Brook and went to that school district. And I grew up in Setauket and went to this school district. And the only reason I knew so much about Stony Brook is my parents took us to the dentist in Stony Brook. So we got to walk around Stony Brook, but there were kids I grew up in Setauket and they, Stony Brook, oh, where is that? And they, you know, like not where is it, but you just didn't go there.
Yeah.
And we went to Port Jefferson and Patchogue, there was nothing in Setauket.
My mother, who was born in 1914, lived in Port Jefferson, and everything that she needed, they went to Bridgeport.
Yeah.
Dentist, school clothing, school books, everything they needed. You took the ferry across, you got off, you went to the stores, and you came back. It's only 18 miles across, right? And it's 60 miles to New York City, 48 miles to Garden City, which was one of the next places. So that was what developed.
All right, we're gonna have to wrap
Yes.
up only because our workshop.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. If you guys can line up there, we have a little something for you, and I'm gonna take a little picture. But we're very thankful that you came and gave us this information.
Thank you.
Really wonderful, really, that's what we need as we go back to the drawing board.
So Ella is our OLLI Executive Council President.
Hi.
So forgive me if I don't know everybody's name, Beverly,
Yeah.
Lindsay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
for
you.
Donna. Yes. Thank you. And Barbara.
Thank you very much.
And we also have little guests.
If you'll turn around when we get there.
Our diplomas.
Yeah.
Oh, this diploma.
Over here.
Oh, the light.
Yeah, the screen is showing.
Excuse me. Sorry.
Good.
Good. And we have a little.
And we have a little presents for you.
Yes.
Very
Thank you very
nice.
much. Let us know if you want,
Thank you.
you know, a different.
This was so
program.
interesting. It really was.
We'll come back with our Stony Brook program. Tell you all about Stony Brook.
I can't wait to have them out. I said, the grandkids come, I'm gonna take them on the whole walk.
We'll take them on the walking tour. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I will.
So thank you again, and we want to thank everyone at home for joining. I'm